I still remember the exact moment my world tilted. It was a Tuesday, crisp and unassuming, and I was elbow deep in a code merge that had already eaten half my patience and all of my lunch break. Then my phone buzzed, twice. First a missed call, then a voicemail. The screen read, Ellen M., Mom's neighbor. Strange. Ellen wasn't the type to call unless it was really important. The kind of person who'd still leave you handwritten notes if your dog barked too much. I played the message with one hand still on the keyboard, half expecting her to mention a leaky pipe or a stray cat. But instead, I heard this shaky breath, followed by 6 words that pushed the air out of my lungs. Mia! Call me! It's your mom! She didn't say what had happened, but I knew it wasn't good. Something about her tone. It was too soft, like she was trying to keep her voice from cracking open completely. I didn't hesitate. I called Ellen right back, and she answered on the first ring. She collapsed, Ellen said, her voice tight, like she'd been holding it together for hours. Out in the garden, just fell. She wasn't making sense. The ambulance took her to Mercy General. I drove like I was chasing time itself. When I walked into the hospital room, everything smelled too clean. Disinfectant and desperation. And there she was, my mother tangled in wires, her skin pale and waxy, like a sheet of paper someone had forgotten to write on. Diagnosis: advanced liver disease. Chronic, silent, irreversible. I sat by her bed and listened to the doctors use words like monitoring, treatment plan, and function levels. But all I heard was a countdown, something unspoken and merciless ticking in the background. The next morning, I went to work like I always did. Hair pulled back, lips tight, dressed in black, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand the idea of color. Our office is one of those pseudo-cool tech spaces. Exposed brick, standing desks, too many succulents. It's a place that hums with coffee machines and the constant click of keyboards, the scent of ambition thick in the air. I'm the lead back-end developer, been here 5 years. I've seen the company grow from a scrappy startup to a respectable mid-sized software firm. I've also seen enough to know when to stay invisible and when to speak up. And that morning, I had to do the one thing I hated most: ask for help. My boss, Jonas, is a practical man. Gruff in meetings, efficient in emails, and borderline obsessive about clean code. But he also has a photo of his dog taped to his monitor, so I figured there was some humanity in there. I knocked on his glass door. You got 5 minutes? I asked. He looked up and nodded. Sure, what's up? I stepped in, closed the door, and for a second just stood there. Then I exhaled. My mom is sick, I began. Really sick? Stage 3 liver failure? Jonas blinked, leaning back. Damn. I'm sorry. Thanks, I said. She's going to need care, consistent care. I'm her only family, so it's on me. He nodded, face unreadable. I'm not asking for time off, but I need a change in my schedule. Just once a week, Thursdays. I need to leave at 4 p.m. to take her to her treatment. I'll start earlier, 6:30, even 6 a.m. if needed, and I'll make up anything else at home. I waited for him to speak. He didn't, not right away. He just stared at the desk like he was doing the math. You're a top performer, he said finally. One of the few people here I trust with critical systems. If anyone's earned flexibility, it's you. Relief swept over me so fast I almost cried. But, he added, don't fall behind. No delays. You leave early, but I still expect results. Of course, I nodded. You won't even notice I'm gone. That was the deal. A silent contract made in a room with frosted windows and humming lights. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I began waking up at 5 a.m. every Thursday, scarfing down cereal and caffeine like it was medicine, and logging in from home before most people even opened their eyes. I'd code, test, debug, all before sunrise. I still crushed deadlines, still led stand-ups, still handled emergencies with one hand on my laptop and the other on the steering wheel, praying I wouldn't hit traffic on the way to the clinic. No one complained. Not at first. On Thursdays, I'd leave at 3:45, my laptop zipped up and slung over my shoulder. I'd head straight to Mom's house, where she waited with her coat draped over her fragile shoulders and that brave smile she wore like armor. I'd drive us in silence. She didn't want to talk much, just squeezed my hand once we parked. After dropping her off, I'd find a corner in the waiting room, connect to the clinic's weak Wi-Fi, and keep working. More than once, I debugged production crashes while sitting next to a vending machine and pretending not to cry. But no one saw that. They just saw my GitHub commits, my bug tickets closed, my performance metrics still clean. I told myself this was sustainable. I told myself I could juggle it all, code, care, and keep pretending like I wasn't unraveling a little more every day. But I was wrong. Because while I was holding everything together, someone else was quietly pulling the rug out from under me. Change in the office rarely arrived quietly. It usually banged through the front doors like a marketing campaign, loud, eager, with branded lanyards and overly enthusiastic introductions. But not Ben. He walked in on a Tuesday morning, wearing a charcoal hoodie, black jeans, and that knowing, unbothered grin of someone who already felt like he belonged. He didn't carry a resume. He carried stories, anecdotes about algorithms, viral reach, and split-test experiments that boosted engagement by 600%. Within an hour, he had half the marketing team chuckling in the break room over a story involving a viral tweet, a churro stand, and a billboard in downtown Dallas. He was the new SEO specialist, performance-focused, results-driven, according to his internal profile. But to most people, Ben was just easy to like. He introduced himself to everyone, individually, made mental notes about where people came from, what tools they used, and whether they preferred tea or coffee. He complimented a junior designer on her wireframe aesthetics, asked one of the QA interns if they liked Pokemon Go, because he saw a sticker on their laptop. People ate it up. "Have you met Ben yet?" Tina asked me that afternoon, twirling a pen between her fingers. "Briefly," I said. "Seems charismatic." She smirked. "You say that like it's a warning." I gave a small shrug. I didn't distrust him, not yet. But I'd seen this movie before. The likable new guy who asked all the right questions, who laughed just the right amount, who knew how to be humble without ever actually sounding unsure. The kind of person who didn't just blend in. He rearranged the room around him. But I had other things to focus on. My mother had a treatment scheduled that Thursday, her third this month. The symptoms were worsening. She had started forgetting names, repeating stories in the same conversation. At the clinic last week, she thought the nurse was me. I didn't correct her. I just held her hand and listened to her call me her little girl, like she used to when I was 8 and terrified of thunderstorms. That week at work was brutal. The servers were acting up. I was running back-end stress tests in the early morning hours and debugging an edge case memory leak that nearly crashed the staging environment. Thursday was approaching fast, and I didn't want to leave anything hanging. I emailed Jonas the final diagnostics Wednesday night, then added a note in our dev channel. "Hey team, leaving Thursday afternoon per usual. Ping me early if anything's urgent. Otherwise, I'll be back online that evening." No one replied. Not that they needed to. It had become routine. Thursday morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., sharp, still dark outside. Just me, the humming lights, and the cleaning crew down the hall. I dove into code, pushed 3 commits before most people had their first sip of coffee, and signed off just before 4 p.m. Exhausted, but satisfied. I didn't see Ben that day. He was probably still onboarding, reviewing analytics dashboards, or sitting in one of those strategy workshops the digital team loved to host in the collab room with all the beanbags and whiteboards. I barely made it to the clinic on time. The nurse met me at the door with a clipboard and an exhausted expression. "Your mom's levels are dropping. She'll be more disoriented than usual. We're increasing fluids." Mom didn't speak much during the treatment. She just dozed, thin arms curled under the blanket, her breath shallow. I sat beside her, laptop open, but I barely registered the code in front of me. My mind was somewhere else, splitting in too many directions. By the time I got home, it was nearly 9:30 p.m. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the couch, and collapsed in front of my laptop with a reheated burrito and a pit in my stomach that had nothing to do with food. Something was nagging at me. Ben. Not because of anything he'd done, but because of what I hadn't. I hadn't talked to him. Not really. I hadn't explained why I leave early on Thursdays, hadn't told him about Mom, the treatments, or the fact that my Thursday afternoons weren't some casual early weekend, but a ritual soaked in grief and quiet survival. He was new, smart, well-liked, and people like that rise fast. It hit me then, how easily narratives form when there are blanks to fill. And in the absence of truth, people fill in whatever is convenient. Maybe to him, I looked like someone who just clocked out early every week without explanation. Someone less committed, less reliable. He probably didn't mean anything by it, if he noticed at all, but I couldn't afford the luxury of being misunderstood. I opened Slack and started typing. Hey Ben, quick thing. Would love to catch up tomorrow, maybe grab 15 mins. Just to sync on some cross-team stuff. LMK what works. I hit send. Then I sat there, staring at the blinking cursor, knowing that tomorrow I'd have to look him in the eye and tell him a part of the story I never wanted to turn into a performance. But if I didn't tell him who I really was, someone else might try to do it for me, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Friday mornings usually felt a little easier. The office lights were softer. People were slower to fire off meetings, content with pastries and jokes over Slack. It was the kind of day where the usual stress backed off just enough for everyone to breathe. But not today. I arrived early again, partly because I always did, but mostly because of that message, the one I sent to Ben the night before. He hadn't replied, but I saw the little seen indicator under the message around midnight. I figured that meant he was either a night owl or a workaholic, or maybe both. By 9 a.m., the office was bustling. People were buzzing about the next product launch, and someone had brought donuts, which meant half the kitchen was filled with sugar-fueled optimism. Ben wasn't at his desk. I found him eventually in the small breakout room by the windows, sipping something from a travel mug and casually scrolling through his tablet. He looked up as I knocked lightly on the glass. "Mia," he said, smiling. "Hey, actually, I was gonna ask to talk to you too. Good timing." I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "Oh, great. Yeah, I wanted to sync on a few things, specifically Thursdays." Ben nodded, standing and stretching slightly. "Yeah, I've noticed that." He didn't sound angry, not even judgmental, just matter of fact, like he was stating the weather. "I figured I'd bring it up today, actually," he added, tilting his head. "I took a look at your performance indicators last night. Impressive stuff, really." "Thanks," I said cautiously. "I've been here a while." "You're solid," he continued, pacing slightly. "Clean code, fast commits, low bug rate. That merge you pushed last week? Smart design." I exhaled, just a little. Maybe this wasn't going to be as hard as I thought. "But," he said suddenly, turning back toward me with a look that shifted the air in the room. "Leaving early every Thursday evening. It doesn't look great. Kind of feels like, what's the word? Entitlement." My breath caught. Ben didn't stop. "I mean, we all have lives. We all have commitments. But clocking out at 4 every week? That's not exactly team-first behavior. Some might call it insolent even." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled, but it wasn't warm this time. It was the smile of someone who'd already decided how the conversation would end. "Just calling it like I see it." "I adjusted my hours with Jonas," I said, steady. "I come in at 6 a.m. on Thursdays, and I work from home in the evenings. Every deliverabl's been met or exceeded." "I'm not saying you're slacking," he replied, his voice still casual, but something about it now felt sharper, meaner. "Just that people notice, and it makes some of us wonder if that title you've got was earned, or handed out during a time when expectations were, let's say, softer." He said it with a smirk, a low, deliberate dig dressed in civility. I felt the heat rising in my chest. My mother is sick, I said quietly. She needs weekly treatments. I'm her only caregiver. That's why I adjusted my schedule. Not because I'm entitled, because I have no choice. Ben shrugged. You don't need to make excuses. It's not an excuse, I snapped, the words slipping out sharper than I intended. It's the truth. He raised an eyebrow, like I'd just confirmed something he already believed. Sure, he said coolly, picking up his tablet. Just don't be surprised if others don't see it that way. Perception's a powerful thing. I stood frozen for a moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly realized the kind of person Ben really was. The charm, the easy smiles, they were just part of the uniform. Underneath it, there was nothing empathetic, nothing curious, just calculation. As I turned to leave, I paused at the door. You're right about one thing, I said, voice low. Perception is powerful, but facts are louder. And the truth? It always leaks through. Ben didn't respond, just sipped his coffee. I walked out, heart pounding. And right then, I knew. I wasn't just dealing with a new coworker. I was staring down a threat disguised as a compliment, and he had no idea who he'd just underestimated. I came in on Saturday not because I had to, but because I couldn't sit still. I needed movement, space, somewhere to put the rising nausea that had been spinning inside me since Friday. The office was ghostly when empty, desks left in mid-thought, post-its half-curling on monitors, the printer humming faintly like it couldn't let go of yesterday. I sat down, still wearing my coat, and opened my laptop. 15 new emails, none of them urgent. One from HR. Subject: Compensation Adjustment Notification. I stared at it for a few seconds. My heart thudded once, twice. Then I clicked. Dear Mia, we wanted to inform you that, effective immediately, your salary has been adjusted by 30% in accordance with company-wide performance alignment protocols. This action reflects recent attendance inconsistencies and aims to realign compensation with availability and commitment standards. Attendance inconsistencies. I read that phrase 3 times before I understood what it meant. They were referring to Thursdays, to my once-a-week pre-approved early departure at 4 p.m., to take my mother, a woman slipping away one quiet piece at a time, to her treatments, 30%. I felt a physical jolt in my chest, like my body had just realized it was bleeding, and too late to stop it. I looked around the office. Everything was still, no one to yell at, no one to cry to, just me, and the sterile weight of injustice delivered in Arial 11-point font. 30%. I scrolled to the bottom of the email. No signature, no name, just a cold HR department and a PDF attachment with a new compensation chart that made my stomach twist. They didn't even have the decency to call it what it was: a punishment. Instead, they wrapped it in euphemisms. Alignment, realignment, protocol, like slicing someone's wings and calling it weight management. I leaned back in my chair, hands shaking. I could hear my breath echoing in the silence. I wasn't sure what I felt. Rage? Yes. Somewhere under my ribs, something was burning, but also shame. Not the kind that grows from guilt, the kind you feel when someone kicks you while you're already carrying too much. I didn't deserve this. I knew that, but knowing it didn't make it sting any less. I thought of the nights I stayed late just to keep a project afloat, the weekends I worked while Mom slept in the next room, the 5 a.m. starts, the missed meals, the flawless commits, the thankless consistency. I thought of Jonas, of how he'd nodded when I asked for that flexibility. We'll make it work, he said. I thought of Ben, smiling that shark-toothed grin, casually insinuating I hadn't earned my title, dropping doubt like poison in the water. And now I knew. He hadn't just suggested it. He'd acted on it. No one else would have noticed my schedule. Not unless someone pointed it out and said, look, there's a pattern here. He saw me as a liability, a flaw in the system. And the system, Jonas, HR, whoever else approved that cut, decided I was easier to trim than protect. 30%. That number kept ringing in my head like a countdown. I sat with it for an hour. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't cry. Eventually, I opened my terminal and ran diagnostics on one of our back-end staging servers. There was nothing urgent in the logs. I closed them anyway. Then I opened a new document, typed out a list. No early mornings, no late nights, no solving issues not assigned to me, no volunteering for overflow tickets, no cleaning up after broken code that isn't mine, no carrying a full salary's weight on 70% pay. This wasn't quitting. This was realignment. They wanted a scaled-down version of me? Fine. They'd get the employee version of a vending machine snack, sealed, serviceable, and exactly what they paid for. No extras. But inside, I knew I was already building something else. Something they couldn't see yet. And one day, they'd wake up and realize the foundations they stood on were gone. Because they didn't just cut my salary, they cut the cord that kept me loyal. And now? I was done giving discounts. The first few days after the salary cut, I became a different version of myself, one I barely recognized, but didn't entirely dislike. I showed up, I logged in, I did my job. But that's it. I no longer sprinted. I didn't stay late. I didn't cover for broken code or smooth over messy handoffs. The girl who used to rescue launches and quietly patch other people's mistakes? She was gone. What replaced her was something colder, calmer, precise, selective. I did exactly what they were paying for, and not a line of code more. At first, no one noticed. My output was still clean. Tickets still moved. No fires broke out. But then came Wednesday. I was halfway through a task labeled Low Priority Backend Sync when I saw him, Ben, lingering near my desk. His posture was tight, jaw clenched, tablet in one hand like he was rehearsing his lines before stepping into a fight. He didn't wait to be invited. "We need to talk," he said. I closed my laptop slowly and looked up. "Now's not a great time." He ignored that. "What's going on with you?" "Define going on." "Your workload's down 30%. Easy. I've been tracking. You're doing the bare minimum, and it's not subtle." I tilted my head, unbothered. "And that's a problem." "Why?" He blinked. "Because you're supposed to be a senior developer. Your team depends on you. Jonas said you were a rock. Now you're acting like you're on your way out." I let that hang in the air for a beat. Then I said, "You cut my salary by 30%. "That wasn't personal. It was targeted," I interrupted. "I took 1 hour a week to care for my mother. And for that, I lost almost a third of my income. No warning, no review. Just an email. So yes, I've adjusted. Appropriately." "You can't run a tech team on feelings," he snapped. "If everyone did what you're doing, this place would fall apart. And if everyone worked unpaid hours and covered for incompetence, this place would survive. But only because people like me were carrying it," I said, quieter now, but sharper. "You don't get to lecture me about professional standards when you decided my worth based on optics." Ben stepped closer. Too close. "You're sabotaging." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, I'm scaling." "You're being petty," I smiled. "You're being predictable." His eyes flickered. Anger, embarrassment, maybe both. Then he leaned in, voice low. "You know, Mia, if you just handled this like an adult instead of sulking, maybe leadership would have reconsidered the cut." I stood slowly. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Sulking?" He didn't answer. "You cut me," I said. "So I stopped bleeding for you." Ben's face hardened, and he turned away without another word. Later that afternoon, Jonas pinged me. "Heard things are tense. Want to chat tomorrow?" I didn't reply. Thursday arrived, and like clockwork, I shut down at 3:50 p.m. I passed Ben in the hallway on my way out. He looked up, expecting something. Maybe shame, maybe guilt. I gave him neither. I walked past him like he wasn't even there. That night, after Mom's treatment, I sat by her bedside with my laptop, listening to the low beep of machines. Her eyes were closed, lips pale. She was slipping further every week, and I was holding her life together with duct tape and devotion. And I thought, how dare they? How dare he? How dare this system punish care like it's weakness? How dare they rip value from my hands and call it policy? I didn't rage. I didn't spiral. I wrote, not a resignation, a recalibration. I quietly rerouted permissions on the backend system I'd helped design. They didn't know, still didn't, that I'd built a live architecture monitoring tool months ago, one I'd been refining on my own time. One that showed every real-time contribution, by team, by project, by phase. They didn't know that without my permission, most of the back-end dependencies would slowly but inevitably fracture. I wasn't pulling the plug, not yet. But I had the cord in hand. The next few days, I returned to work like normal, but I stopped fixing what wasn't mine. I didn't explain myself to Jonas or to Ben. I didn't justify my boundaries or soften my tone. Ben fumed quietly from across the room, occasionally tossing sharp glances my way, but he never confronted me again. Because he knew. They all knew. Something had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. And I wasn't just walking away from extra work. I was walking towards something of my own. They discounted my labor, but they had no idea what my silence was costing them. There's a particular kind of silence in an office when something's shifted. An unspoken collective awareness. People don't say it out loud, but you can feel it in the way conversations break off when you walk by. In the way glances linger too long, then scatter too fast. That's what greeted me Monday morning. I made it exactly 13 steps past the reception area before I felt it. Eyes on me. Subtle, cautious. Like they were watching a house about to collapse and didn't want to be caught in the debris. And then, I saw it. A new nameplate gleaming like an insult outside what used to be my office. Ethan Mercer, senior back-end developer. I stopped mid-stride. My breath didn't catch. My pulse didn't spike. I just paused. Like my body already knew the script, and the scene was playing out exactly as expected. I stared at the door. The office where I'd written system blueprints at 2 a.m., where I'd paced during emergency bug hunts, where I once cried, silently. After a deployment, I pulled off while my mother was hospitalized. That office had been mine. My sweat, my mind, my code, woven into the very air. And now, rebranded. I didn't need to Google him. Ethan Mercer, the CEO's younger brother. Trust fund aura, known more for his last name than any actual technical achievements. Rumor said he'd failed upward through 3 startups, torched a round of Series A funding, and still somehow landed in a corner office with stock options. Of course he did. He was family. "Hey, Mia," came Jonas's voice behind me, too cheerful to be sincere. "Can we step into the conference room for a quick sync?" Of course. Because backstabbing never comes with a calendar invite. I followed him. No words. Just a blank expression and the hollow thud of betrayal filling the air between us. The second the door closed behind us, he started. "Look, I want to frame this right. It's not about performance, okay? You've done great work, truly. But the leadership team decided it was time to bring in fresh perspectives. Someone with a broader product vision." I stared at him. "Someone who shares the CEO's DNA." He blinked, almost flinched. "This isn't personal." "It never is. That's the problem." Jonas shifted in his seat. "Ethan will be overseeing back-end from now on. But we still value your experience, which is why we're moving you into a new role, Project Integration Liaison." I let the title hang in the air like a bad smell. Which means documentation, handoff management, bridging communication gaps between teams. In other words, babysitting. "Mia, you can't fire me outright," I said, flat and quiet. "So you demote me, strip my influence, and ask me to clean up after the new guy you handed my work to." His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. But oh, he wasn't done. "We'd also like your help onboarding Ethan. Just a few days. Show him the ropes, walk him through the architecture, set him up for success." I could have laughed. Really. Right there in that sterile room. under the soft hum of fluorescent lights. "You want me to train my replacement?" Jonas had the nerve to say, "You're a team player. I know you'll do the right thing." I stood, slow and controlled. "You're right," I said. Jonas blinked again. "So, you'll help?" I smiled. "Of course. I'll train him." What I didn't say was, "I'll train him exactly the way you deserve." When I met Ethan later that morning, he was lounging in his chair, like it had always belonged to him. Designer sneakers, an expensive smartwatch, the kind of guy who called Slack messages pings and thought version control was a vibe. "Mia," he said brightly. "Heard you're the brains around here. Glad we'll be working together." I extended my hand. "Welcome aboard." He didn't notice the chill in my voice. The next few days were a masterclass in strategic deception. I walked him through our codebase, selectively. I explained our architecture, vaguely. I loaded up dashboards, curated to show what he could understand. He nodded a lot, took half-hearted notes, asked basic questions with a tone that suggested he already thought he knew better. I gave him surface-level clarity and deep-level confusion, and I smiled while I did it, because behind the curtain, I was already rerouting the wires. I had a map, one he didn't know existed, a real-time visualization of every functional module, dependency, and silent failure the system hid under polish. I knew where the weak spots were. I had built them intentionally agile, but now, they were mine to tighten or detonate. I wasn't sabotaging, I was preparing. Every moment I trained Ethan, I logged how much he didn't know, how much he missed. I kept records. Quietly. Obsessively. He thought I was being helpful, but what I was really doing was building the most elegant revenge imaginable, letting them fail with the exact tool they stole from me. And when the system starts to buckle, when performance dips, when a client integration shatters because Ethan skipped a fail-safe callout, they'll come looking for me, but they'll be too late, because I won't be there to catch them this time. I won't be the net, I'll be the drop, and it won't even make a sound when it hits. It's a strange feeling, writing your own replacement's future downfall, line by line, while he brags about his weekend golf game and tosses buzzwords like confetti at stand-ups. But that's exactly what I did. Ethan settled into his new role like a man inheriting a kingdom he neither earned nor understood. He brought in motivational quotes, a bonsai tree, and a standing desk that he never once used properly. And slowly, with the confidence of a man born into unearned authority, he began to put his fingerprints all over the systems I had built. At first, I did what they asked. I trained him, technically. I handed him documentation, walked him through the architecture diagrams, answered his questions. But here's the thing about knowledge handed down. The details matter, and I gave Ethan just enough detail to hang himself with. I created utility scripts, little helpers I called them, designed to manage low-level diagnostics, reset processes, and reroute back-end alerts. They were all real, all functional, but subtly flawed in ways only I understood. One script would reroute logs to a shadow bucket that I had access to, but would overflow after 30 days, making debugging a nightmare if not cleaned. Another tool, packaged as a performance patch, triggered a silent memory leak if used more than twice within a session. It took no more than 15 lines of code to make it invisible. I buried these things in the back of the repo, behind innocuous names and helpful comments. Then, I pointed them out to Ethan during training. "This script might speed up the alert processing," I said casually one afternoon. "Oh, hell yeah," he replied, already typing. "Efficiency is everything." He didn't ask what it did beyond that. He didn't read the fine print. He just smiled like a kid handed a new toy. Perfect. Meanwhile, his behavior shifted quickly. Where once he'd played the polite newcomer, now he acted like a monarch in a castle made of other people's bricks. "You don't need to worry about the critical deployments anymore," he said one morning, flipping through his tablet like he'd been born into back-end command. "I've got them streamlined." Streamlined. God, I almost choked. He started making little comments in meetings, always with a grin, always, just kidding. Mia, you'll love this code. I kept the logic simple so even you could follow it. Careful, Mia. You're sounding a bit too technical for your new liaison role. Oh, come on, kiddo. Don't take it so seriously. Kiddo. I was 10 years older than him, had more experience, more knowledge, more hours logged in this system than he'd likely have in his entire career. And yet, here he was, performing authority while I sat in the role they demoted me into. At first, I said nothing. Then I started collecting. Every Slack message, every flippant email, every time he ran a script I'd seeded. I noted the timestamps, the commits, the symptoms of creeping failure that were already beginning to bloom like mold in the foundation. He blamed latency issues on the infrastructure team, shrugged off alert gaps as just noise. When a payment integration broke during a Friday release window, he casually told support it was legacy code from before I took over. Legacy code, my code. And the irony? He was right. It was mine. Because I was still inside it. Still stitched into the fabric of every critical system. Still holding the strings. Only now, those strings were set to tighten. At night, after Mom's treatments and the dinner, we tried so hard to make normal. I'd sit at my kitchen table and scroll job listings with one hand while sipping chamomile tea with the other. I wasn't just surviving. I was building a path out. Quietly, carefully, I pushed my resume into the right inboxes. Former colleagues, startups, firms that respected actual skill more than inherited names. I got responses. Quickly. People remembered. People still valued. One CTO replied with a single line, "Are you still as fast and precise as you were in 2019? I wrote back, "Faster, sharper, hungrier." We scheduled a call, but I didn't rush my exit. Not yet. I had one last act to complete. And the best part? I wouldn't have to press a single button. Ethan would do it for me. He'd run the scripts, skip the warnings, ignore the cracks. And when everything started to fail, when the system stuttered under the weight of his ego and the tools I'd gifted him turned into traps, he'd have no one to blame but himself, and no one would think to blame me. Because I was just the liaison now, just the girl in the background, smiling, watching, waiting. The weekend passed in a haze of quiet domesticity. Saturday, I helped Mom trim her roses in the little garden patch she refused to let die, even as her body betrayed her in slow, merciless degrees. Sunday, I made tea, read half a book I wasn't really following, and watched the clouds roll in low over the skyline like a secret. I didn't check the code base, didn't refresh the logs. I didn't need to. Everything was already in motion. I had set the clock, wound the gears, and handed the key to Ethan's grinning, clueless hands. All I had to do now was wait. By Monday morning, the atmosphere in the office had curdled. Even before I walked through the doors, I felt it. Off-kilter, buzzing. As I passed through the glass lobby, I saw people gathered in tight clusters, hunched over monitors, fingers flying. The energy was frantic, voices clipped and low. Something had broken. No one looked up as I entered, which was telling. I reached my desk, placed my bag down slowly, and opened my laptop like it was any other morning. But within minutes, Tina was by my side, eyes wide. "Have you heard?" she whispered. "Heard what?" She leaned closer. "The entire dev repo for the new rollout is gone. Deleted. Wiped. Scripts, documentation, diagrams, gone. Even the AWS instances tied to the project have been purged." I kept my face still. "Backup server?" "Compromised," she said, her voice now a whisper. "Restores aren't syncing. The DB image files are corrupted." I blinked. "How?" Her face said it all. "All the logs point to Ethan." Of course they did. But I didn't say that. I just turned toward the growing panic ripple spreading through the dev floor. From across the room, I spotted Jonas, pale, sweating, hovering near Ethan, who looked like someone had yanked the ground out from under him. He was gesturing wildly, flushed with panic. "I didn't touch anything important," he was saying. "I mean, I ran a cleanup thing, but that's standard, right?" Jonas's voice was low and dangerous. "Cleanup? What kind of cleanup?" "Something Mia gave me. Some utility script. She said it would help reduce lag in staging." I felt every head around us pivot. Jonas's gaze locked onto me like a sniper's. "Mia!" I stood slowly, calmly. "Yes?" "Did you give Ethan a script that could delete entire system environments?" "No," I replied, steady. "I gave him a tool that clears temporary log files, one that includes header warnings, confirmation prompts, and failsafes, unless someone overrides the logic manually." Ethan's eyes went wide. "I didn't override anything." "Then you probably ran it twice," I said gently. "There's a condition in the header comments about redundant triggers on protected folders. It's all there, if you'd read it." Jonas's jaw twitched. "You're saying he triggered it on his own?" "I'm saying the script isn't dangerous," I replied, "but mishandled code always is." Tina coughed quietly into her sleeve. Someone else murmured, "Rookie mistake." "Why would you run a script twice without checking logs?" snapped one of the senior devs. I didn't know it would." Ethan was sweating now. He looked genuinely confused, and for a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered him calling me kiddo in front of interns. Remembered the smugness, the condescension, the insult of handing him everything I'd built, and him assuming it was his by right. Jonas turned slowly toward me, and I could see it in his eyes. The doubt, the creeping suspicion. He didn't have proof, but he knew. He knew this wasn't an accident, that the code hadn't failed. It had followed instructions. Ethan just hadn't understood the fine print. There was no malware, no backdoor, no malicious lines, just complexity and carelessness. "Fix it," Jonas barked finally. "Both of you, see what you can salvage." Ethan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. I simply nodded. "Of course," I said. "I'll do what I can." Over the next few hours, the recovery effort began. Quiet panic became frantic energy. The leadership team held emergency meetings. Engineers pulled backups from disconnected local drives. But the core of the damage was done. The new rollout, 6 weeks of work, was toast. Clients were already emailing. "And HR?" They started asking questions. Ethan spent most of the afternoon trying to explain himself. At one point, I walked by his desk and overheard. "I mean, she trained me. She gave me the script. She said she didn't warn me." But I had warned him. He just hadn't listened. That was the beauty of it. Jonas called me into his office late in the day. The door closed softly behind me. He looked tired, suspicious, a little frightened. "You're not angry about being replaced, are you?" I blinked. "I'm adjusting." "You didn't sabotage him, did you?" I met his eyes directly. "Wouldn't that be reckless?" He didn't answer, because there was nothing he could prove. And he knew it, because every click that mattered had Ethan's fingerprints on it, not mine. By the time I submitted my resignation, the building already smelled like smoke, figuratively, but unmistakably. The servers were still twitching from the weekend's disaster. The team was trying to stitch together recovery patches in between half-panicked calls with clients. And Ethan, once the golden boy, now shuffled through the office with the posture of a man walking through a dream he couldn't wake from. No one said anything when I arrived that morning, but they knew. Everyone did. There was something final in the way I walked, something permanent in the canvas tote over my shoulder. I had wiped my machine clean the night before. No files, no traces, no open loops. My security credentials were already scheduled to expire at midnight. I didn't owe them another keystroke. But before I left, there was one last performance to attend. Jonas called me into his office as if he still had authority over me, as if this was a normal HR exit. He didn't even offer me a seat. "Mia," he began, leaning on the desk with his sleeves rolled up like a man in control. "Let's drop the act." I raised an eyebrow. "What act?" "You did this," he said. "The script. The damage. It wasn't just incompetence. You wanted this to happen. Wanted what? I asked, voice calm. For your golden boy to press the wrong button? To ignore documentation? To delete a 6-week deployment with a script I told him to handle carefully? You sabotaged him. No, I said, stepping closer. I gave him a knife. He chose to juggle it blindfolded. He glared at me, jaw clenched. You're bitter. I'm done, I said simply. There's a difference. You're throwing away everything. No, I said. You did that when you cut my salary, demoted me, and let a man with a last name stomp through my legacy. He leaned in, voice low. You think people won't see what you really did? I think they already are. That stopped him. Because, as it happened, the timing of my resignation was not a coincidence. 3 days earlier, I'd had a quiet dinner with the CTO of one of JetFrame's largest partner firms. We talked architecture, scalability, technical leadership, and then we talked strategy. Your company is imploding, he said over coffee. The board sees it, investors see it. We're watching them scramble to plug the holes you left. I didn't sabotage them, I replied. You didn't have to, he said with a smile. You just stopped protecting them. They made me an offer on the spot. Lead systems architect, full control over back-end design, a direct line to the CEO, and a press team ready to spin the narrative. They humiliated you, he said. Let us use that. I hesitated, for only a moment. Then I said yes. So when I walked out of Jonas's office that Monday, the statement was already scheduled. The headlines hit by noon. JetFrame's star engineer resigns amidst internal chaos, blames CEO nepotism for system collapse. Ex-engineer joins rival, calls out toxic leadership culture. JetFrame in crisis, senior developers flee following data disaster. I didn't give a tell-all interview. I didn't need to. I gave them a single brutal quote. The difference between leadership and liability is accountability. I wasn't the one who lost control of the system. I was the one who used to hold it together. Within hours, my phone exploded. Recruiters, journalists, former coworkers. Some asked how I pulled it off. Others asked how they could follow. And Ethan? He was silent. Publicly, anyway. Internally, I'd heard, he was in free fall, isolated, blamed, stripped of technical responsibilities, while PR tried to reframe the disaster as a temporary glitch during innovation realignment. Jonas had no choice but to deflect. Blame contractors. Downplay the scope. But no one was buying it. Because Mia Cardenas, the woman they'd demoted, the one they'd underestimated, had walked out the front door smiling. And now? She was building somewhere new, stronger, and she wasn't working for anyone's little brother ever again. After the headlines dropped, the ripples began. Softly at first. Quiet client emails asking for clarification, partner firms reviewing terms, and industry blogs posting subtle but loaded headlines like, "How much talent can a company bleed before it hemorrhages?" JetFrame tried to act like nothing was wrong, but the industry had already smelled blood. The project I had architected, the one Ethan had accidentally wiped, was a multi-million-dollar client rollout with a 3-month delay buffer. With it gone, and no working recovery, the client walked. Just like that. And others, watching from the sidelines, followed. In 2 weeks, JetFrame lost 5 contracts. Not startups. Not little side projects. Major accounts with annual revenue tied directly to service continuity. I knew because 3 of those companies reached out to me personally. They didn't even hesitate. They'd seen what I'd built, and more importantly, what JetFrame destroyed. "We'd like you to oversee our systems integration," one VP said. "Whatever it takes. We trust your hands more than the ones they replaced you with." So I did. I worked. I led. I quietly brought in former coworkers who'd also jumped ship. And the whole time, JetFrame was still spiraling. Every Monday brought new whispers, another round of layoffs, a key engineer gone, a rumor that Jonas had been removed from 2 internal committees. Then, the bombshell. An anonymous letter posted to an industry forum titled, "What Happens When a CEO's Brother Breaks the System." It laid out everything. my demotion, my salary cut, the exact dates of the server crash, and the mishandled recovery. Screenshots of Ethan pushing commits with untested scripts. The post ended with, "She didn't have to sabotage anything. They did it to themselves." That same day, I got called into a meeting with my new boss, Elena Lynn. She had that look again, the one that meant she wasn't asking questions, she was calculating next steps. "We're filing a claim," she said. "I've consulted with legal. We have grounds." I blinked. A claim? For damages, wrongful demotion, retaliation, possibly defamation, depending on what internal emails we can subpoena. I laughed, partly out of shock. "I never said I wanted to sue." "You didn't have to," she replied. "What they did was textbook retaliation, cutting your pay after you requested time for caregiving. That's protected under federal law. And demoting you to make room for someone with no qualifications? That's not just unethical, it's demonstrably harmful. They lost clients. Their board knows it." She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You deserve a settlement." I swallowed, the weight of it hitting harder than I expected. "Wouldn't it be messy?" "Of course," Elena said. "But that's the point. Women like you don't get justice by being quiet. And if we're loud enough, it doesn't just fix your story. It changes things for the next woman they try to silence. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about record." So we started documenting. I pulled old performance reviews, proof of my working hours logged during Mom's illness, screenshots of Slack messages from Jonas praising my work weeks before the cut. We built a timeline, a case. Meanwhile, JetFrame kept crumbling. I heard Ethan had been reassigned to special projects, a convenient euphemism for damage control exile. A leak said one board member had called for Jonas's removal outright. Investor confidence was down. Press requests were up. And when a rival company used JetFrame as a case study in The Hidden Costs of Nepotism at a tech conference, I knew they weren't recovering. Not from this. The most poetic part? They'd done it to themselves. I hadn't inserted malware. I hadn't sabotaged the system. All I'd done was walk away. And when I did, the structure rotted from the inside. A week later, Elena walked into my office holding her phone. "Legal just heard back," she said. "They're rattled. Jonas's team wants to talk." About a settlement? About everything. I stared out the window, city lights blinking beneath a twilight sky, and thought, good. Let them come to me now. Let them try to clean up the wreckage I never had to touch. Because in the end, I didn't destroy them. I just stopped saving them. The collapse of JetFrame wasn't sudden. It wasn't cinematic. There was no explosion, no dramatic headlines screaming, "End of an empire." It was worse than that. It was slow, public, embarrassing. A ship that refused to admit it was sinking until the water reached the captain's neck. Week after week, more clients pulled out. Several left without even requesting refunds. They just wanted distance. A few published open letters about misalignment of values, which in corporate speak might as well have been a funeral notice. Investor calls leaked. Engineers posted cryptic resignation tweets that went viral. Inside tech circles, JetFrame became a cautionary tale. "Don't JetFrame your engineers," one thread on X read. It had over 30,000 likes. At my new company, I watched it all unfold from a distance, sipping coffee at my standing desk while building something far more elegant, far more resilient. But what mattered more than the quiet triumph was what was happening at home. Because Mom was getting better. After everything, after the nights in emergency rooms, the missed diagnoses, the helpless dread, she was improving. Her treatment was working. Because my new company didn't just give me a desk and a salary, they gave me time, they gave me support, they gave me insurance that didn't make me fight tooth and nail for every test. They connected me with a patient advocate. A nurse came to our apartment once a week to check her vitals and help with her medication regimen. Elena, my boss, personally called in a favor with a friend at a medical institute to bump Mom up the list for an experimental care program. And when I offered to pay them back out of my salary, she waved it off. "You've already paid us in code, Mia. Let us pay you in peace." It was surreal, almost disorienting, to be believed, to be supported. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding everything up alone. Mom started taking short walks again. She stopped flinching at every cough. We laughed more. She began teaching me how to cook the things she hadn't made in years. Real food, healing food. "You're different," she said one evening as we stirred lentils. "Lighter." "I'm free," I said. And then, just as I was settling into this new life, Jonas reached out. His email was short, stiff. The subject line: "I know you don't owe me anything, but..." He said he was no longer with JetFrame, that the board had requested his transition after another round of client departures. Ethan had stepped down officially to focus on personal development. No press release, no apology, just silence. Jonas wanted 10 minutes, not to ask for anything, he claimed, just to say what he should have said before. I ignored the email, for a while, but something in me itched. Not anger, not spite, just the need to face the thing I'd outrun. So I replied. We met in a quiet cafe near my new office, neutral territory. He looked older, grayer, a little smaller than I remembered. "Mia," he said, standing awkwardly, "thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't smile. I waited. He sat, cleared his throat, and said, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition." I stayed quiet. "I've played that year over in my head 1,000 times," he continued. "And every time I do, I see the same thing. We lost you long before you left. We stopped listening. We stopped seeing you. And when the board asked for a scapegoat for the system failure..." "You gave them one," I finished. "Yes." He looked at his coffee. "You could have sued. You still could." "I'm not interested in your money," I said. "You already lost something far more valuable." He winced. "I know, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix it." "No," I agreed, "but it's a start." He looked up, eyes glassy. "Are you okay?" That question hit harder than I expected, because the truth was, yes, I was okay. I had a job that respected me, I had a team that trusted me, and I had my mother, still here, still fighting, still smiling at me when I walked in the door. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm better, stronger, and I'm not angry anymore." He nodded. "I don't know how to make it right." "You don't," I said gently. "You move on. You learn from it. And next time, if you're ever in that position again, don't choose comfort over integrity. Don't let fear turn you into someone who shrinks others to stay tall." He blinked. "I won't forget that." I stood. "Neither will I," I said, "but I won't carry it anymore." We didn't shake hands. We didn't hug. He stayed seated as I walked out, his expression unreadable. Outside, the sun was just starting to dip behind the skyline. I turned toward my building, my new building, with clean air in my lungs and the weight of old things finally left behind. Some chapters end with slamming doors. Mine ended with a soft click, and I never looked back.